Welcome back on a Wednesday. JP Morosi back with us, leading the league in information. JP, I'm going to read you the first paragraph of David Adler's story on MLB.com, and I'm going to send you on your way. Here we go. Over the last year, in an effort to better understand the rise of pitcher injuries, Major League Baseball interviewed over 200 experts from all areas and levels of baseball. This has been published in what's being called the MLB Pitching Injury Report. Give us the details.
Well, Matt and Harold, good morning. This is an important day as baseball tries to wrap its arms around and understand this issue, which is the prevalence of pitching injuries. The most important thing here, Matt, and you mentioned it in David's story, is how comprehensive the league's approach was on this. 200 people interviewed, some conclusions reached, and as we talk about trying to issue and get at a problem, the most important thing is to define it. And by having all these interviews and accumulating a lot of information at all levels of the game, what amateur pitchers are doing, what professional pitchers are doing, the key conclusion here is that the prevalence of injuries is tied directly to the pursuit of velocity, the pursuit of stuff, broadly defined as the nastiness of your pitches, trying to have the most devastating repertoire you can have in terms of both velocity and movement. What we're finding here, Matt and Harold, is that by pursuing these things and by training throughout the year, in many cases taking less and less time off in the winter to then get into a specialized throwing session to sharpen your stuff and make sure that it's as devastating as it can be, there is a cost there in not resting and in pursuing velocity. And so the conclusion here, in a lot of ways, guys, is that the pursuit of stuff and velocity is behind the number of injuries that we're seeing. And now the task for everybody who has a stake in this great game is figuring out ways to address it in a way that reduces the frequency of pitcher injury.
I think one of the other interesting reveals in this was they also conducted a survey to figure out if there was a timeline for when, in general, these injuries might happen more frequently. And what they discovered was it was spring training and pre-spring training. So what do we conclude from that? Is it the fact that pitchers aren't resting enough and then they get to ramping it up quickly? Is it the fact that maybe over the winter they've changed things mechanically and then they get into a game situation too quickly? How do we take that information that most of these problems happen in March and April?
Matt, I agree that this is the most important takeaway, because at least when you look at this graphic and say, oh my goodness, the issue here is February and March. Certainly there are injuries during the season, we all know that, but a disproportionate number of them are happening early in the year. So at least now we've diagnosed the problem within the problem, which is that this is the pressure point. And I think, Matt, a couple things that you said are really important. Number one, that pitchers are spending a lot of time in the offseason workshopping their repertoire, whether it's pitch design, different ways of describing it, but they're throwing more often and at higher velocity earlier on in the process, or as close to the end of the fall season as we've ever seen, to be honest with you. And there are pitchers right now, here we are on the 18th of December, who are already working really hard in pitching labs to try to sharpen their stuff. And what that graphic is telling us, Matt and Harold, is that there is a cost to be paid of that, of not having the downtime. That's number one. And also, I think it's a really good point that you make, Matt, that your body and your biomechanics are relearning and re-implementing these changes that you've made during the offseason. That when you get into the competitive situation, that you're doing it most often in February and March, and that maybe as your body is getting used to it, and maybe it's an issue of your lower body not getting synced up with your upper body as you've made a mechanical change. Well, sometimes that can result in an arm injury. The other thing that I think is really important and stands out to me, and I'm sure, Harold, you got some thoughts on this too, one of the quotes in the report that stood out to me was that we're hearing pitchers describe the situation of, in the minor leagues, you're utilized in one way, And then once you get to the major leagues, that might be the first time in your career that you're actually pitching on back-to-back days if you're a reliever. Right. So with the rest that happens, Harold, in the minor leagues and the way things are spaced out, all of a sudden then the game and the expectations are different in the majors because it's no longer about development. It becomes about winning. In the minor leagues, it's about developing and getting your repertoire ready for the show. Once you get to the show, you got to pitch on back-to-back days. And a lot of pitchers nowadays, Harold, they don't have that experience in the minors.
Well, and to that point, there's one constant: velocity. I don't care if you're in the big leagues, minor leagues, high school, getting ready for the draft. It's velocity. So I look at it this way. One, fantastic report. So important. And you're right, this is a big thing for baseball. But I look back, the other big thing that happened that baseball had to adjust to, it's a nasty word, but it was a steroid era. We had to get it under control. If you look at the injuries, you're talking about pre-spring training and spring training where the injuries occur. Well, what's happening? You're on your own. And the biggest thing we learned in the steroids was guys had their own personal trainers. So what did baseball do? No more of that garbage. You're going to have to be mandated on who's training you, and they have to pass a strict understanding of who they are. I think that we're going to have to get to some kind of mandates that say, here's the people you can work with. They're on staff with us and understand. So you're not ramping up every second. Guys do not rest. They're trying to get the edge, trying to get ahead of everybody. That was the same stuff we said about steroids. He's trying to get an edge. And then they had to put it under control. And I think we got to do that here with the pitching. Look, it's documented, well documented. You have to rest. And guys are not resting. So last thing, I'll let you jump in, JP. So in my crazy thinking, I'm like, we have a trade deadline. You have to trade guys by this. They can't anymore. You have a free agency. You can only sign. You only become a free agent after World Series. I don't know how they regulate what I'm getting ready to say, but it would be great to say season ended, no pitcher picks up a ball till mid-December. And they meant, and nobody's getting an edge. You're making everybody rest their body. And I'm sorry, but if I'm paying you $50 million, I'm going to control the say of how I think that arm should be used. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, H, it's a great point, and I want to share a couple of quick anecdotes. Number one, we've talked a bit this winter about the time that I've spent speaking to Hall of Famers about their journey, and one story that I heard stands out the most of all. Ferguson Jenkins, who 5 times threw more than 300 innings in a major league season, spent multiple off seasons playing basketball for the Harlem Globetrotters. Okay, yeah. That did not hurt his durability. And I'm not saying that we're gonna have all these players go play in the NBA in the winter, but Harold, you've been a big person on multiple sports for a long time. That is a data point of data points. You got a Hall of Famer who would throw 300 innings a year, would be as durable as possible. He did not spend his winter in the pitching lab. He spent his winter on the basketball court, and he's in Cooperstown. Another story, LaTroy Hawkins. I remember asking him, of course, he's from Gary, Indiana. LaTroy, growing up, how many innings did you throw a year, a full calendar year? He said about 30. He had about a 20-year major league pitching career and was one of the most durable relievers of his entire era. Think about that. This leads me to another key point from this study. The number of pitchers, and I'm going to read this data point because it's so important. In 2018, at the perfect game in terms of the top high school players, one of the top showcase circuits. Perfect game. 3 pitchers, back in 2018, hit 95 miles an hour or above. In 2024, that number was 36.
Yep.
12 times as many guys were throwing 95 plus. And we all understand this on an individual basis. And here's where we have to really wrap our minds around this too. The incentives in the game with velocity are such that is what gets you paid. The incentive structure, however we do this, whether it's the club side, player side, etc., Matt and Harold, the incentives have to at some point in time be adjusted such that it's no longer being rewarded just on velocity, because young kids are getting the message that if you want a Division I scholarship, you want to get drafted and advance in baseball, it's all about velocity. Velocity is leading to these injuries.
No,
JP, good stuff, man.
The last, thanks, JP.
Yeah, JP, good, a terrific kind of summary of this really important report. You can read about it on MLB.com and elsewhere. JP Morosi with us on a Wednesday. Good job, bud.
Good job, JP. You know, my point, my last thing I was going to say is, and he touched on it, with the perfect game and the showcases that kids are trying to do with the injuries and everything else that are piling up, we have to start young. Because it's a proven fact, no matter who you are, if you have an injury, it's more likely you're going to be re-injured because you're pushing yourself more.
And that was a part of this report, too, the connection between amateur baseball and what happens once they get to the big leagues. You know, the thing that I always go to, I talk about this a lot, is when baseball outlawed smokeless tobacco products in the clubhouse, in the minors, in the mid-'90s. And the goal there was take it away from the developmental stages. By the time the next generations of big leaguers arrive, they weren't raised on chew.
True.
It worked.
No, it worked.
Not as many guys chew as used to be the case.
It worked. I mean, I'll finish it with this. We can keep going back and forth all day. Same thing with drug testing. You know, there was no drug testing when I played in the big leagues. And now you're getting tested in high school and everything else, and they're used to it. And I remember when they first said, we're going to start drug testing, I was like, no way, are you kidding me? It was so foreign of a concept to somebody who never grew up being tested.
Right.
Now, if you don't test somebody today, they look at you like you're crazy.
It was an invasion of your personal space back then. And then the writers were on it.
There's some drug dealing going on.
Not drug dealing, Kenny. Drug testing. Let's take a break.
Good. That's great stuff.
When we come back, we're going to look into a new hour of Hot Stove on a Wednesday. Back in Studio K with Harold Reynolds, Matt Vasgersian, one of the big signings in Major League Baseball this offseason. Max Fried to the New York Yankees. It didn't take the Yankees long to pivot into the pitching category after they fell short of the Juan Soto sweepstakes. It is official. This video put out by the Yankees on social media. Max Fried signing his contract and becoming a New York Yankee. Everybody loves the idea of Fried in the Bronx, including Max himself, who was all smiles, not only about the dollars,
but about, too. No hair.
Right,
no facial hair.
He doesn't have that D'Artagnan facial hair going. 8 years, $218, largest all-time by a lefty, which is really staggering when you get your head around that. There's the numbers as far as the AAV breakdown. Full no trade, no deferred dollars. Max Fried, a Yankee for the next 8 years. And we're getting ready to send you out to the Bronx for his meet and greet with the New York media. And you can see everybody lined up there. Pitching coach Matt Blake will be there. Aaron Boone, of course. Brian Cashman, of course. And Max will be center stage here shortly. We're ready to send you out there.
So when you think about left-handers in New York, this is the biggest, I think, since Randy Johnson went there. Remember the news when Randy went there and he grabbed the camera?
It didn't work out that good either.
All that stuff.
It was not a great match. I mean, you know, CeCe, Guidry, like a homegrown guy. But when you talk about importing a guy at the peak of his market signability.
Yeah, I guess CeCe, you hit me with that.
This is a big deal, though, man. Max Fried at $218 for 8 years, largest pitching contracts in league's history. And so much of this is recent history, of course, because the dollars just keep going up. What about in terms of the franchise? It's fourth behind only Judge, Cole, and A-Rod. And he passed the captain with that $218 million price tag.
In only 8 years.
These are tough comps, man. I mean, look, you know, Derek Jeter played a long time ago, not that long ago, but you get what we're saying here. The value of the dollar is different in baseball now than it was even 10 years ago.
Well, I think the one you look at is Garrett Cole. That was
the most recent.
Yeah.
Right.
But you're right. I mean, the price is continually going up.
Yeah. We take you out there. That is clean-shaven Max Fried. Looks like he's 19 years old again. It's funny what the removal of facial hair will do for your look. Let's listen in. Live coverage of the Yankees news conference announcing Max Fried.
Hey, the Yankees threw a lot of money against the wall, and Max Fried took it. Yes, 8-year deal, $218 million. That is the largest contract ever handed out to a left-handed starting pitcher. Max Fried, who turns 31 in January, he got it after a career in Atlanta. This is what the left-hander said after his press conference in the Bronx.
A lot of people have worn these pinstripes, and you know, there's a certain feel, and you know, I'm excited about being able to put the pinstripes on in Yankee Stadium for the Yankees, and it's one of the most storied winning franchises in sports, and I want to be able to kind of do my part in adding to that. Winning's a big priority for me, and at the end of the day, every single year the Yankees come to spring training, the #1 goal is to win a World Series. It's not to get to the playoffs, it's not to do anything besides hold up the trophy at the end of the year, and knowing that I was going to make a potentially a long commitment, I wanted to be able to be in a place that I knew I was going to be able to win.
Max Fried was part of phase 2 after missing out on Juan Soto bringing him back. They decided to bring in Max Fried, a record contract, $1 million more than the contract David Price landed, which was historic. The 2025 rotation options looked pretty good, man. You slide Max Fried behind Garrett Cole, Carlos Rodon, and the Rookie of the Year, Luis Gil. Clark Schmidt is your number 5. Marcus Stroman is adding depth to the starting pitching ranks for the New York Yankees. Dan, is this the best starting rotation in the American League?
You know, when you take a quick look at it, it just might be. I'm going to tell you this. Max Fried, in my opinion, when healthy, and he's had some injuries the last couple of years, but nothing that's like cause for alarm, like an elbow or a shoulder. He's one of the top 5 starting pitchers in the game of baseball. Smooth gas. He's a pitcher, not a thrower, and I think he's going to strive. I think he's going to have such a good run here with the New York Yankees. I like the way he pitches. He's not afraid to throw the ball into right-handers. Great fielding pitcher. He does so many things well. And the thing I like the most about it, if you're looking at it, I know that's an 8-year, over $200 million commitment.
And he's going to be 31 in January.
I know, but he has a great pitcher's body. You look at his frame. He's a slender guy. He's very athletic. Smooth gas. He's not one of those guys. He's falling off towards third base when he throws. Big-time curveball. So he has the 2 things you really need to game. You need velo and you need spin. Not afraid to throw the ball into righties and or lefties. I think that's the key. You might want to look in, but he'll run that seam. There's that 2-seamer that he threw inside right here to Bryce Harper. And on top of it, tremendous fielding pitcher. Go back to that 5th inning in Game 5 of the World Series. Remember that little tweener between first base, right? That was a mix-up with Garrett Cole and Anthony Rizzo. He'll have that all cleaned up. I get it. You can take a knock and say, hey, look at 2023. Only 72 2/3 innings, 174 1/3. I know this. You're a big fan of a guy keeping the ball out of play, swing and miss. He gets that. Low contact rate. He does a lot of things. Ballpark will be good for him to pitch in. And what I like the most about this, there's been life for the Yankees outside of Juan Soto. They've gone out and they've improved this team. Fried is a huge addition. Devin Williams, huge addition to this team right now. They've made a couple of moves right now that signify that the Yankees, and I don't think they're done yet. Now, I don't know where they're going to go. It's going to be a corner. Is it going to be first? Is it going to be third base? Give credit to Brian Cashner. They had a taste of the World Series. It's been a while since they've been back there, but they're at it again. And I'm telling you right now, on paper, I'm going to say right now, yes, they'll probably have the best starting pitching in the AL.
Are they better than they were last year?
You go back to that series against the Guardians, Soto was so impactful. It's hard to say that. If you could tell me that Cody Bellinger is going to be somewhere between the guy in 2023 and the guy in 2024, I would say yes. I will say this. They're going to be more athletic. And if you dive into the 3 moves that they've made, they've upgraded defensively in center field. The bullpen, all of a sudden now you have Devin Williams, you have Luke Weaver to back into that bullpen. And you give some support to a guy like Garrett Cole. The couple of things to me that jumped out why the Yankees lost that World Series, they were beat on the peripherals, on the fringes. They were out-hustled. They were out-base run. They were out-defended. They were out-cutoffs and relays. All the little things that they didn't do well, Dave Robertson, the Dodgers, took advantage of all of that. And now they bring in a good defender in Bellinger, whether that's center field, it's right field, or first base.
And we need to dive into that because it looks like his versatility is being used to bring the price of poker down for the free agent first baseman.
そしてこれで私たちの特集を締めくくります。MLB の投手不詳に関するリポートやニューヨークヤンキースが新たに迎えたマックス・フリード選手について深掘りしてきましたが、いかがでしたでしょうか。マックス・フリード選手の加入は、ヤンキースにとって新しい時代の幕開けを象徴しています。 この契約が示しているのは、ヤンキースが再びワールドシリーズの頂点を目指しているという確固たる意志です。フリード選手の優れた投球技術、そして彼がもたらす経験とリーダーシップは、チーム全体の士気を高め、さらなる可能性を引き出すことでしょう。フリード選手はただの投手ではありません。彼のプレースタイルは、パワーと精密さを兼ね備えたものであり、特に大事な場面での冷静さが光ります。ヤンキースの一員となった今、彼の存在は他の選手たちにも良い影響を与え、チームの結束力をさらに強固にすることが期待されます。このような大きな補強がチームにどのような化学反応をもたらすのか、非常に楽しみですね。また、MLB 全体としても、投手の健康管理に関する議論が深まってきたことは、未来の野球の在り方を考える上で非常に重要なポイントです。選手たちが最高のパフォーマンスを発揮するためには、身体をケアし、適切なタイミングで休息を取ることが不可欠です。このリポートが明らかにした多くの課題と提言が、これからの野球の発展にどのように寄与していくのか、非常に楽しみです。特に、投手の負傷が春季キャンプやその前の時期に集中していることが明らかになった点は、注目すべきです。オフシーズン中の過度なトレーニングや早期の調整開始が、負傷リスクを高めている可能性があるため、リーグ全体として、選手たちに適切な休養を促す仕組みが求められます。選手のキャリアを長く保つためには、短期的な成果だけでなく、長期的な健康を重視する面が必要です。さらに、ヤンキースのフロントオフィスの動きも見逃せません。彼らはフリード選手を迎えることで、先発ローテーションを強化し、ガレット・コールやカルロス・ロドンといったエース級投手との強力なラインナップを構築しました。この布陣により、ヤンキースはアメリカンリーグでトップクラスの投手陣を誇ることとなり、ワールドシリーズへの道が一段と現実味を帯びています。そして、私たちが見逃してはならないのは、チームワークの力です。ヤンキースだけでなく、すべてのチームが大切にするべき価値観として、選手たちの絆や信頼が挙げられます。それぞれの役割を全力で果たしながら、同じゴールを共有する仲間たちがいるからこそ、大きな夢が実現します。このような瞬間を応援できるファンの皆さんも、また重要な存在です。これを読んでくださった皆さんにお願いがあります。ぜひ、私たちのチャンネルを登録していただき、最新の野球情報をお見逃しなく、また、コメント欄であなたの意見をお聞かせください。フリード選手のヤンキース加入についてどう思いますか？彼がチームにもたらす影響について、あなたの考えを教えてください。さらに、野球が持つ感動や興奮を一緒に分かち合うために、あなたの周りの友人や家族にも、このチャンネルを紹介してみてください。一人でも多くの方と、この素晴らしいスポーツについて語り合える場を作りたいと願っています。私たちはこれからも MLB の試合解説や選手たちのストーリー、最新のニュースをお届けします。そして皆さんと一緒に野球の楽しさを共有し、さらなるファンコミュニティを広げていくことを目指しています。次回の配信ではさらに深い内容でお届けする予定ですので、ぜひお楽しみにしてください。最後に、野球の魅力は勝敗だけでなく、そこに至るまでのドラマや努力にあります。それぞれの選手が日々積み重ねる努力や、チームメイトとの支え合い、そしてファンの皆さんからの応援が、野球というスポーツを特別なものにしています。この旅路に共に参加してくださる皆さんには、心から感謝しています。これからも一緒に MLB を盛り上げていきましょう。次回の配信でお会いできることを 心待ちにしています。それでは、また。